Everyone knows that feeling, wanting to experience more stories, but struggling to find the time. That's where Audible changes everything. With over 1 million audiobooks and Audible originals, there's a story waiting to spark anyone's imagination. Take The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, the gripping psychological thriller that's keeping listeners on the edge of their seats. Imagine unraveling its mysteries during your morning commute, or losing yourself in its twists and turns while doing household chores. That's the magic of Audible. It transforms daily routines into opportunities for thrilling discoveries. The best part? Members get access to thousands of included titles, with new content added regularly. From bestsellers to hidden gems, every genre imaginable is at their fingertips. And with one easy-to-use app, switching between favorites or discovering new passions has never been simpler. There's more to imagine when you listen. Start a free 30-day Audible trial and get your first audiobook free at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Now it's time for Inspirational Women, and my guest, Jennifer Donnelly, a wonderfully engaging author who writes young adult fiction, stories that really are perfect for young adults and upward. We can all really appreciate the stories, and we're going to discover this as Jennifer joins us to share some insights into her newest book, Beastly Beauty. Jennifer Donnelly, good morning. Thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
Well, I am grateful, really beyond grateful. Just a little background here is that you and I have had a little bit of a challenge getting connected this morning. And the fact that we've persisted and gotten here, I think, is a great lesson, and also really demonstrates your kindness and graciousness in making this happen and allowing us to have this conversation, because I'm really so excited about your newest book, Beastly Beauty. So I'm sure you, as this being your baby, another baby, are as excited having it reach the light of day and audiences.
Finally, it does seem like a very long birth with a book, like an elephant sort of time period. It takes years to get the story down and get it out on the page. So it's very exciting for me to finally have it out in the world and in readers' hands.
And it is, timely. This kind of twist we see in the book with Beastly Beauty. We're all familiar, of course, with the other way around, Beauty and the Beast. And actually, that was one of my favorite Disney movies. I'd rewatch it. And this is really such an interesting take, and I really am in awe of how you created the characters and really fleshed them out, and the language and all the drama. So when you say it took a long time for this birth, really, what was the length of time writing the book?
It was actually about 2 years, which is a little bit long for me. Of course, I was working on it during COVID and the pandemic, and that sort of slowed me down a bit. But this one was tough, and it took a long time to come together.
So when you say tough, what about it was tough for you?
Getting to the emotion, actually. Emotions play a huge part in this story.
Yeah.
And the message that I really want to bring across with them to young readers and also to readers who are not so young is the danger of boxing away our darker emotions. We're all happy to sit with wonderful, warm emotions like pride and joy and compassion. But the darker ones, like guilt or shame or sadness or anger, those are a lot tougher. And in the story, they play a huge role, and they show the danger of turning your back on them, of boxing them away, because they do explode out and they cause all sorts of problems in the story. So getting those characters down, getting them correct, showing, again, the danger of trying to ignore them instead of sitting with them, trying to bring them out, trying to ask them, why are you here? And what do you want from me? That took a long time to get right.
And I feel you did get that right. And that's why I was just so in awe of the characters, the personalities, and really trying to unravel this and the way the story evolved. And I'm trying to see behind the curtain, like, what else is going on here? What's happening? So you are obviously so skilled at being able to make this happen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was, It was a bit of a labor of love. I had this idea of, swapping the two characters. It was, as you mentioned, it was one of your favorite fairy tales. It was one of mine too, but I had questions about it. And my tale does feature a twist. In the classic version, of course, the beast is a man and the beauty is a woman. And in my version, I've switched that around so that the beast is a young woman and the beauty is a young man. I kind of reversed this power dynamic and ended up with not one but two very difficult creatures. Beau, who is a handsome young thief, and Arabella, who's this young noblewoman who's imprisoned in her own castle. So in the classic version, of course, the beast, who's a man, is enchanted and he calls all the shots and he's the boss and he rages and he shouts and he takes prisoners. And the young woman, the beauty, has to accommodate him. And she really has to deny her own wishes and desires as she tries to understand him and help him become his better self. And I kind of had enough of that, and times have changed. So I thought it was time for an update to this fairy tale. And I do strongly feel that we human beings are very complex creatures and that we really all deserve to be fully who we are, not forced into these one-dimensional gender roles that maybe don't fit us anymore.
Exactly. Oh, yes, it is. And that's where your talent with being able to really flesh out these characters and those emotions, and then the storyline to really have the flow that it does, and the emotion it builds up in us. I mean, it's just, the tension. It's just it's so right there. It really is a classic page turner. Like, okay, where are we going? What's happening? Yeah, again, I'm in awe. And I think that readers have to be, anybody picking up this book at any age, as I say, because I am certainly well beyond young adult. I'm buying that for young adults who are like my grandnieces and nephews. So you see, this is where we're at. And I think it touches us wherever we are because we're always going to learn. If we really want to grow, we're always learning.
This is very true. And yes, it is a young adult book for ages 14 and up, but this book I hope will get a crossover readership from adults as my other young adult work has done. And I think, everyone is fascinated by fairy tales, no matter your age. We first hear them when we're maybe 4 or 5 years old, and they really stick in our heads, but we come back to them, I think, throughout our entire lives because there's just such a deep well of meaning and sort of life knowledge in them that we are drawn to, I think, again and again and again. Some people think of fairy tales as these very simple princessy stories, with happy endings, and they're all kind of pink and glittery. But the truth is, they're actually very rich, complicated, and often very dark stories. And once you hear one as a child, you never, ever forget it. I mean, if you think about it, probably, some of us know who the main characters are in big epic stories like Star Wars or Dune or the Marvel Universe. But pretty much everybody knows who Cinderella is, or Hansel and Gretel, or Little Red Riding Hood. It's just this common knowledge that reaches back across all times and across all cultures. And I'm just fascinated with the question of why. Why do these quirky stories get in our head when we're so young and then stay there? And I think the best answer I can come up with is because fairy tales tell us the truth. I mean, they are absolutely full of crazy things like magic mirrors and gingerbread houses and talking wolves, but they still give it to us straight, especially the older, Grimm's Brothers versions, which tend to be a lot darker.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they're telling us is that the world can be this very dark and dangerous place, and a place that's full of monsters and wolves and witches. But then they tell us we can beat the monsters. And, they'll also tell us there are times when we get very hopelessly lost in the dark forest. But then they tell us we're brave enough and we're smart enough to find our way out of the forest and find our way back home. And maybe that's the answer. The deeper answer right there is what fairy tales give us more than anything, I think, is a sense of hope.
which is really large, again, very core to this story as well. And hope. I use that word so often in conversations with my guests that, the messages bring hope. And that is something that is so vital to us at any time. And I feel like right now we are desperately, if you will, but we're greatly in need of that hope.
Hope and kindness, and
Yeah.
you see that in the fairy tales. You see difficult and dark behavior from characters like the ugly stepsisters or the evil stepmother, but you see great kindness too from characters like Cinderella, and persistence, and then, just a refusal to change the core kindness that Cinderella has deep inside her. She doesn't let any other person's bad behavior touch that and destroy that.
Right. And so that's what's great about fairy tales, because yes, we're reading them to children. Eventually they begin to read them on their own. But the message is such that there's a part of it that the young child can receive, and it plants a seed, but we as the adult are getting that too, and we fit it into wherever we are in our growth at that point. So that's where I think fairy tales, again, are just so critical to our life.
I think so too. I think they're actually sort of trap doors into the human psyche. As I mentioned, they've been around for centuries in one form or another and exist across all cultures. And I think they were a way that we human beings had to sort of explore ourselves, our inner lives, and explain ourselves to ourselves long before Freud came along and tried to do the job for us. And I think they still speak to something very deep and primal inside us, to our fears and our dreams, and to this deep hunger human beings have for things like truth and justice and love.
Yes. And we definitely see that coming through here. I'm not going to, give away any great endings, but we know it's a fairy tale, so something needs to come to some kind of resolution. And seeing that gender change, I think really fits with today's world, because, well, probably could have for some decades, but certainly now, to really encourage that and say that, we don't have these stereotypes in existence.
Very true. And I think the fairy tale, hopefully Beastly Beauty, says that gender roles have changed a lot dramatically, since the 1700s, which is when the original Beauty and the Beast was written in France in the 1700s, but also that our gender roles continue to evolve. We're not there yet. And that fairy tales are, as stories, they're generous enough and expansive enough to allow writers like myself to come in and play with them, and then mirror these really huge seismic social changes back to our readers.
We were talking about the emotions and how we need to be able to express them. And I think you do it so beautifully to show just describing what the emotions, personifying them, which really in this way, just gives them a life. We really see that in ways that we can understand more than it's that feeling, that anger or that angst is inside of me. Seeing it out here, I mean, that feels so brilliant.
Thank you, Kate. I was thinking actually back to my own teenage days when I was writing this book, and how huge and powerful emotions seem to be then. They can overwhelm you when you're a teenager. They certainly did to me. They kind of drove me at times and controlled me, almost as if they were physical beings. And I think that's where I got that idea for personifying them in the book. Sometimes they took, in my life, too much control, just like Lady Espydra, who's a major, very sinister, dark character in the book, does. And I actually love this idea of these dark, negative emotions breaking free of our heads and our hearts and sort of assuming human shape and personalities. I wanted to know, what would they be like? What would anger look like? And what would shame sound like? What timbre would her voice be? And what would guilt dress like? So as a writer, as a storyteller, I just had a field day bringing these characters to life and describing them for my readers.
And it's amazing how large a cast that is. That is, I mean, that's the whole gradation of emotions that we experience. They're there, and that's why, really, for any age, but certainly thinking about young adults and so much of what's going on in life, the challenges they face today versus what I faced in my youth. I mean, it felt like a lot then, but compared to now, I don't think there's really that much comparison. And I think this book can be so healing, so supportive, like your best friend listening to you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you feel that way about it. That's what I was hoping for. I think teenagers have it so hard. They've always had it hard, but I think it's even worse now with the pressures of social media and the constant pressure to, get those likes and those rates and oh my gosh, I don't know how kids deal with it. So one of the things that I wrote this book for, and an important takeaway I want young readers to have, is that we ultimately hold the key to our own happiness and our own freedom in our own hands. It's for us to determine, and no beast or beauty or king or princess, however you see that, whether you see that as an actual person or a metaphor, can save us or doom us, because we ourselves, each and every one of us, is the hero of our own story. And it's up to us to get that happy ending for ourselves, not for anyone else to bring it to us. We have to do that ourselves.
And that's the kind of message that is so critical to bring forward. And books, I think, are such a great way to do it, because parents may have the best of intentions, but even as we see in the book, parents, but even the best parents today, it's just that natural kind of tension that goes on between, but what do you know? You're just my parents, or you're not living my life. And so a book has a way to just dispel all that and make it so personal that you don't feel like someone's telling you. You're discovering this on your own.
It's true. Being a parent, we all, myself, we all know how effective lectures are with young kids. But a book is a different universe, a different experience, a different voice coming at you. Books have always helped me from when I was a young child through my teenager years to now. And I really want to return that favor. Again, I wasn't facing the pressures in my day that teenagers are. So if I can, in some way, as a writer, help push back on that, and if I can give a young reader some tools to help them fight those voices, whether they're inside that teenager or coming from the outside, the voices that tell them that they're not enough, that they're too loud or too quiet, too big, too little. If I can do that, that makes me feel very, very happy. And it makes me feel like I'm repaying a little bit of the debt that I owe to all the writers who have always helped me.
And those voices, so we saw the personifications, but there's also the literal within the characters themselves, within Beau and Arabella. We hear those messages in their head. We can hopefully, I hear that in it, and I can analyze this at my age. And hopefully, young adults, as they read this, and I think they do, we can't underestimate their awareness, but they realize, oh my gosh, that is just something saying that in my head. So that's another piece of this that is so invaluable for readers.
Yes, I obviously agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I think what Beau and Arabella really have to learn, they're both two very wounded creatures in a lot of emotional pain for their own reasons. Arabella, because she made a terrible mistake when she was about to be betrothed to a man she did not want to marry in an arranged marriage. She made a terrible mistake and is paying the consequence of that with this terrible curse that she's been under for a century, imprisoned in her castle. She has to learn how to love and be loved in return, or so she thinks, in order to break the curse. So she's got her own emotional pain. She's carrying a terrible guilt because so many servants are imprisoned in the castle with her. And Beau is this young man who's handsome and charming, but he had a tough life too. He was orphaned at a young age, and he fell in with a pack of thieves, and he's become this very hard, cynical young man who thinks that, everyone who exists around him is to be robbed and used and sort of taken advantage of. So both of them are wounded. Both of them are in a lot of pain. And what they have to learn, and I think what we all have to learn as a young person, is that before you can begin to love another person as a friend or as a romantic partner, you need to learn to love yourself, and you need to accept yourself and understand yourself. And in some cases, especially in Beau's and Arabella's cases, you need to learn to forgive yourself. And you need to understand again that you are the only one who can do this, the only one who can bring about this happily ever after. It's not for others to fix us. We need to do that work ourselves.
Yes. So that's why it's so empowering, really, and we take from it what we need. And here's the beauty of books, right? You go back the next time and oh my gosh, the message is somewhat different. It shifted. Did I get a new book? But we've grown, right? And all of a sudden we're ready for a new awareness, new insights.
It affects us differently when we first hear it at 4 or 5, when we hear it, when we come back to it, perhaps in the form of a retelling as a teenager. And again, when we come back to it, perhaps as a parent or a grandparent, and we see things in that story and things resonate with us that we didn't see the first 1 or 2 or 3 times around. That's what's so miraculous and so beautiful and so generous about these ancient tales.
Yes. One thing about the woundedness, and I was thinking this as I was reading Beau's story as that evolved, and the things that happened to him, I could see the correlation between how young people get into gangs these days. The kind of enticement, what happens, where they end up. And I thought, again, we're looking at an ancient story, but yet its current reality is such as that. So I thought that, too, was a very interesting layer, whether that was quite your intent or not. But still, I think people would pick that up.
Absolutely. And we're all seeking, companionship and friendship and love. And Beau is no exception to this. He's lost his mother. And a few years later, he loses his dad. And he's, like every young person, seeking family and seeking sort of acknowledgement for who he is. And unfortunately, he falls in with the wrong family.
Yes, right. So major awarenesses here that are going on. So, Beastly Beauty, it's pretty freshly out in bookstores. And, of course, we can find it at any of our favorite book sources, right, Jennifer?
Yes, you can find it at your local independent. If you have one near you, you can find it online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you like to buy your books.
And I always encourage, supporting our local brick and mortar stores, they in our community and that sort of thing. They do great things. And so do that if you manage to get there. But the book, because you are, one of our best-selling authors. And so no doubt it's available right there on the bookshelf.
Yes, it is. And you can, I love to hear what my readers think about my stories. And I would love to hear from readers at my website, jenniferdonnelly.com, or on socials at Jen Writes Books.
So have you been getting any feedback yet? I know it's quite new, but still, has there been some feedback to you?
There has been, and I'm happy to say it's good feedback because you always, oh my gosh, it's so nerve-wracking when you let that little paper child of yours walk away from you and walk out into the world. But it has been embraced by readers of all ages, I'm happy to say, which is very, very gratifying to me.
And I'm glad to hear that. And I'm not surprised because, as I said, I can see the appeal to these various ages. And I'm so, so grateful for our younger generation that this book is here, because I think it's great. Well, entertaining, if you will, but also so much reflective material. So it's not just, just dash off and, I'm done with that book. I can see, again, coming back to it because of that layered effect.
Thank you, Kate. I'm happy to hear that. As a writer, I work on that. Of course, I want to keep my reader hooked and turning the pages and entertained, with a wonderful, exciting story. But you also want to give them the deeper messages, the what you need to grow emotionally and the nourishment you need for your heart and soul. And hopefully I've done that.
Absolutely. One of the key guiding lights of my life, if you will, is kindness. That kindness can't be overstated in our life. And it was so great to see, toward the end of the book, kindness prevailed there, and it melted resistance, and it dissolved anger, and it defanged cruelty. And it was like, oh, that was, really so heartwarming to me to read that, because I do believe it's not cliche. I really feel if we embrace kindness, it really does overcome these things.
I agree 1000% with you. But it's difficult for some people at different times in their life. If you're wounded, if you're hurting, you tend to go into a ball, you tend to go into a shell, and you develop, these sort of prisons that you build for yourselves, brick by hard brick. And my characters have done that. And when they first come together, Beau and Arabella, they do not like each other. They're very hard shelled, they're very wounded, and they're clashing all the time. And it's a slow, hard process for them to begin to trust and to begin to have the expectation of kindness when no one has given it to them. In Arabella's case, for almost 100 years, and in Beau's case, for most of his life.
Yeah. And those numbers are irrelevant, really, when it comes to our life. And it starts with some young people at a very young age. So yes, we need to break down those walls. It is about breaking down walls, isn't it? You literally in the story, but even figuratively in our lives, and about building the bridges again. Yes. In the story.
Absolutely. In the story, when Beau first comes across Arabella's enchanted castle, he's with his whole pack of thieves, and the castle, has been basically crumbling for 100 years. And they go across a bridge, and they're in the castle, and then the beast appears, and they try to escape, and most of them get across, but the bridge crumbles underneath them, and so poor Beau is left stranded in this castle with the beast, with no way of getting out. So eventually he learns that Arabella once in her life wanted to be an architect when she was a young woman. She wanted to build beautiful structures, cathedrals and palaces, but she was told no. She was told, you need to get married to this nobleman, and that's what we want for you. You're a duke's only child, and this is what you have to do. So this was all denied her, but Beau eventually learns that she has this ability, this talent, and says, okay, you're going to work with me to build me a bridge to get me out of here, since you're the one who trapped me in here. And as they work on this bridge together, they're building not only a bridge from point A to point B, but to themselves, to each other, to sort of better versions of who they used to be. And it's not the most subtle of metaphors, but I think it works really well in the story.
Yes, it's perfect for the story. And does it need to be subtle? No. Sometimes this is perhaps the way we learn about this form of writing, and then that awareness in our own lives, to take it for something that's, kind of just natural here and right in front of us. The book is just amazing. I am so grateful that you had this vision, and goodness, to keep writing over the course of 2 years, and probably it was already germinating within you prior to that.
It was. I was thinking about this fairy tale. I had retold two fairy tales prior. The first one was called Stepsister, which is delving back into the Cinderella fairy tale and looks at the story of the ugly stepsisters, and why did we call them ugly? What was it about them that made them ugly? And why do we call people ugly? Why do we accept the term? Who gets to decide who's ugly and who's pretty? And then the second one in my retelling trilogy was Poisoned, which looked very much at the dynamic of between Snow White and the evil queen, and what made the evil queen, in quotes, evil. Why do we sling that term at women in power who have to control a whole kingdom and deal with fractious nobles? So when I came to Beastly Beauty, I had the image in my mind very much of a young sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old teenager back in 1700s Europe who was facing an arranged marriage and who didn't want it. She wanted something more. My character, Arabella, is a talented artist who wants to be this architect, who wants to build and have that creativeness as part of her life, and is told no. So I wanted to find out what happens to someone who's had to deny her emotions and her desires, and what might happen when those emotions and desires finally burst free.
Well, as I said, this is truly so amazing. And I appreciate your mentioning the two other books, because I wasn't aware of these. And I think if listeners haven't been aware, that too leads us to that, because this is grappling with these crazy kinds of ideas that society kind of pushes on us, where do they come from? But it gives us the opportunity to really look at it and grapple with it and make choices for our own selves, our own lives.
Yes, exactly. And to sort of bring about, again, our own happily ever after, which I prefer to sort of cast as a happily ever right now. What do we need for happiness in our lives right now? There's no guarantee of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of taking these tales and taking the wisdom and then being able to push at them a little bit and change them. And I think fairy tales like that, because they're not these stories that are kind of sitting, moldering away in a coffin. I feel they're alive, and they're sort of these living creatures that want us to take them out and look at them again. And it's almost as if what we're doing as retelling writers is sort of pulling an old dress, or dresses out of grandma's trunk and recutting them to fit us and in the here and now.
Right. Well, you are definitely talented at grappling with that and then putting it forth in such a great, captivating story. As I said, this is a page turner for sure, Beastly Beauty. And I highly recommend that you get it for yourself. And, just thinking, graduation time is coming along. What could be a more perfect gift for girl or boy? We're switching genders here. There's something for everyone, and a great lesson. So Jennifer Donnelly, I so appreciate who you are, what you do, and for taking time with us this morning.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was my pleasure, and I hope your readers enjoy Beastly Beauty.
That brings us to the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Jennifer Donnelly and Sunday Morning Magazine with Luke Miner from WA 529. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com, and I will get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or share these important stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Just click on the Listen tab, then podcasts, then either of the show names, and then look for the guest names. I now wish you and your family a day of discussing your hopes and dreams and encouraging each other in their pursuit. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 1069. Good morning.